start serving the individual kind of specialty or department or the finance team or whatever it would be, we are reversing what you and I are now talking about, which is all coming together, all working together for the one purpose. And that is the health, the healing of an individual or beyond that.
Well, hello and welcome to the Restore Healthcare Project. I'm Dr. Jennifer Kang. I want to thank you for being along with us. Remind you, if you haven't yet, to subscribe, follow, like, give us a 5-star review because we're so excited to partner with you in what God is doing in healthcare. I am here for our final, I believe, core value discussion with Paul Mannwaring, who is a favorite on this podcast, discussing together these core values of the kingdom that we think apply to healthcare. Paul, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, good to be with you again. Yeah, our last core value. But then I think you've got some scheme up your sleeve about going back.
More than likely, there's more to be said, right?
Yeah.
Well, Paul, I'm just going to jump in because I think we have a lot to talk together about this one. This one is in my mind a really critical core value and really interesting. So, core value number 12 of dual realm healthcare takes its place as part of the whole body of society, acknowledges that we all need each other, much as each part of the human body functions only in synchrony with other parts of the body. No one individual patient, practitioner, or resource is of greater value than another, but each must function only in its ideal scope of function. That's a lot there. And I think when you and I have discussed this, you so have this amazing ability to condense down into like a theme, and you entitled this theme "Unity."
Yeah. I think the verse that will always come to mind will be Ephesians 4:16. And, what's incredible, isn't it, of Paul is that he used the human body as the example. And more than once, he used the body as the example of every part working together, and even talked about the parts of lesser honor, etc., etc. And we all know what he was talking about. And so Ephesians 4:16, from whom the whole body, being fitted and held together by that which every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. That probably should be in every organization on the planet, that every one of us works together and fits together, and that it is unity. Unity, of course, is not equality, and it's not necessarily always going to be about agreement at one level. But there is a call to unity, and what I love is Ephesians 4, the whole chapter, but the chapter begins so early on with the one body, one spirit, just as also you were called in one hope. And so when we come to healthcare, I think it's not difficult to go from these verses and go, we're working together, we're in a team. It's about unity, and there's loads of directions I could buzz in. But the truth is that you stand with a patient as an OBGYN, and you've got your patient on the table, but there are a whole lot of moving parts that got you and that patient to the table. And without those moving parts, that patient's not on the table, and you're standing there wondering what's going on. And it's a very simple illustration, but to me, it's that we're in this together.
I mean, certainly this is an illustration. This is a demo. This is a model of the kingdom that like makes a lot of sense to us as healthcare workers. So, conveniently, this really is easy for us to grasp, the model of the human body and all the parts functioning together. And certainly in healthcare, what has been developed over the centuries is quite remarkable. It's like a living organism of different parts fitted together, each carrying, really quite complex things and bringing that together to create a whole system that presumably functions. And certainly there are places where the system does not function very well, and you can actually point out some of the reasons for that would be components of the system are not valued or are, God forbid, not present. And I'm thinking even of just kind of the main building blocks of healthcare, where we have different units, we have different disciplines, we have physicians, we have nurses, we have ancillary workers. We have housekeepers who maintains the cleanliness and hygiene of the facility. How would we have safe surgery without the housekeepers? I mean, really. And yet, even though we all know that and that's how we're functioning, there are places in our system where we've developed mindsets where we maybe overvalue or undervalue components, to our great detriment, I think. And I think we're pointing out that this is a kingdom value, that we, although we're diverse and maybe don't agree how everything should be done, we come together to bring our specific expertise, and that's how it should be. And we should value that across the board.
Yeah, and you can take it from the example of you with the patient. You can take it to the hospital that you work in. You can take it to the broader community of healthcare professionals that exist in a community and don't all work in the hospital. But you can also go beyond that, which we obviously often do, into the erasing the secular sacred and marrying the natural and the supernatural, bridging the us and them. All of those they're dripping with unity. They're dripping with alignment. They're dripping with working together.
I mean, certainly, I think that we can see pockets of what I would call concerning warning signs in healthcare culture currently, or in mainstream culture, where there's like exclusivity or in a way almost divisiveness, right? So I'll just point out one example that I find particularly problematic, where you have a particular discipline of medicine, such as um, I'll say obstetrics, right? Because that's what I'm used to, obstetrics and gynecology. And then you have maybe a more alternative version of that, naturopathic medicine, and we have different perspectives on how to heal and treat a particular disorder, or even what causes that disorder. And we may actually both be right and both be wrong. Like, that's actually possible. But if we begin to develop mindsets where we are exclusive and divisive, and we say, don't follow that perspective, the only right way is my way. I don't need you, is actually what we're saying, I think. And you are not a part of the process and the solution. I think that's actually a warning sign of something gone wrong. It's like what Paul identified. Like, no one part of the body can say, I don't need you. Like, I'm the heart and I don't need you, kidney, because I'm the most important part. I am what keeps this body alive. But that's obviously like, we can see the fallacy in that, because I'm sorry, heart, if you don't have a kidney, you're going to end up with toxicities of toxins building up in the blood, and you are not going to be able to function. You can't say I don't need you. So I think we see pockets of this in healthcare right now, and I wonder if you'd like to kind of speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think when I think back, you and I talked during the COVID crisis, and in a way birthed these values out of that. And there probably can't be a better example in immediate history of challenges that we were in, that you particularly were in, which overlapped everything, didn't it? The political position, the financial scenario, the costs of all of the treatment, then the different views about, you know, what should and we shouldn't do, and all of that sort of thing. So I think it was an incredible example. What I think though is when I think it through, some years ago, like before I probably ever um, jumped into this beautiful world of healthcare, in not as a nurse, but in terms of ministry, I was teaching about administration and the gift of administration and the gift of government. And one of the things that I said was that, the failure of healthcare, um, and I will continue to say both sides of the pond. We have different ways of providing, but the problem will always be that we forgot the spirit, and the spirit of healthcare is get well, be healed. And so when the administrators are leading and they're more worried about the profit and loss statements, and they've moved away from the original uh, spirit of healthcare, which is healing and health of people fundamentally. And so anytime we move away from that and we start serving the individual kind of specialty or department or the finance team or whatever it would be, we are reversing what you and I are now talking about, which is all coming together, all working together for the one purpose. And that is the health, the healing of an individual or beyond that. And one of the things that I teach a little bit on this, and that what fascinates me about 416 is, if I can just run down this trail, and you'll call me back if you don't think it's where we should go. It says for the building up of the body in love, and then Paul in when he goes from 1 Corinthians 12 to 1 Corinthians 13, he said, "I'll show you a more excellent way." And so I believe that the building up, the unity that we're talking about is the excellence that you desire, we desire for healthcare professionals. And excellence isn't perfection. Uh, it's different, and and I think it's a key. Actually, it probably overlaps when we start talking about some other areas like burnout and what have you, because excellence is really my language. Is all things point to His excellency. He is His excellency, and so if whatever we do serves His excellency, it's excellence, and we're drawn to excellence. We're driven to perfection, and the drivenness is what causes the burnout. The excellence builds the whole. Perfection actually points to us. Excellence builds us up. Perfection burns us out. So I actually believe that there's something for the building up of the body in love is a key to excellence, and that excellence is when every dynamic of the organization is serving the spirit of the organization, which in this instance is health and healing. And the problems come when individuals are serving their own specialty or their own discipline above the coming together for the whole. And so that's when, if you like, they turn away from the circle, and they're building their own world, their own ministry, their own discipline. Nothing wrong with that, as long as it's positioned to serve the whole and the spirit. And so I really do believe that there is something very kingdom about the unity of healthcare professionals. And you and I would, you know, I go back further than you, you know, and I love now that we've got many more disciplines involved. Back in the day when I was nursing, I don't think too many people were that concerned about diet unless you were a diabetic. There wasn't we weren't bringing the dietitians. We weren't necessarily talking, about physical fitness and lifestyle and things like that. And of course now it's very broad. So I think there are lots of reasons to be hopeful. And then what we would do is we specifically in Restore Healthcare are saying no, but the spiritual has a part to play. The prayer has a part to play, but we're not saying again that is building up in its own right, because that breaks the unity. What we're saying is that the goal is get healed. I got healed by a surgeon. I'm as healed as somebody who was healed with the laying on of hands, and surgery is not a second class healing. So I think what we're saying is every dynamic is serving that place in the center, that spirit, which is we're here to help you to be healed, to live a healthy life in all of the beauty of holistic medicine and all of those elements.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful picture, isn't it? That each part understanding its own value, fitted together, functioning together, and valuing every other part. I think the danger zone that takes us out of excellence is maybe when we don't value other parts, or maybe when we don't understand our own identity, our own lane, our own function, value that, when we think more highly of ourselves than we ought, perhaps, as Paul talks about in Romans 12. Um, because there isn't a hierarchy of value in the kingdom of God. And I think that using the body as an example for us to understand that is so helpful, because although some parts may have a more visible or prominent role, they aren't necessarily any more or less valuable than another. I mean, the immune system doesn't have a particularly visible role. It's insidious, it's microscopic, but it's everywhere. And without the function of this complex system, the rest of the whole would not survive. So it is not less valuable. And Paul talks about the less honorable parts of the body are actually given more honor in how they are treated, because they are private. They have a different role and should not be as visible. I mean, I even think about how in healthcare we struggle with that. We actually have created a caste system to some degree that we're still trying to dismantle from some bygone days of, doctors at the top with all the power, or maybe now the administrators at the top with all the power and value and the highest paid, and all these markers of value that in our human systems of thinking we assign. Where do we even begin to bring in the kingdom message about how we deal with hierarchy? I mean, I think it's here, right? It's in Ephesians. It's what Paul talks about in each part coming together. Hello, Restore family. Before we jump back in, I want to speak to those of you who are actively building solutions in healthcare. Here at the Restore Conference this year, we're creating some space for something we call the Innovators Hall. This space is for people who are developing things like clinical programs, nonprofits, businesses, technology platforms, or new models of care, all from a faith perspective. It's a space to share what you're growing in healthcare with other professionals who care deeply about meaningful, lasting change. It's also an opportunity to connect, receive real feedback, and build relationships with people who understand faith and healthcare together. So if you feel like you're carrying something that could strengthen healthcare, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at drkang@restorehealthcareproject.org or apply by following the link in the description. We'd love to have you be part of it.
Yeah, I think it's we probably need to go back over the subject of honor, because that's really what we're talking about. And you probably know, my definition of honor is the recognition of glory in another, and that goes from the least right the way through. And in a way, organizationally, I would say if you don't have a culture that honors the janitor, you don't have a culture of honor. And similarly, it's what Paul says. If the body doesn't honor the unseemly parts, the body's not honoring. And uh, so for me, it starts with honor. It starts with the recognition of glory in another, and honor's not one way. It can never be one way in an organization or a society. It must be every way. And for me, honor is Peter Senge back in the 80s wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. Um, it was the management textbook at the time, and it was about a learning organization. And I think really what he was saying was what Paul writes in the Bible, that if we're an honor organization, we will be a learning organization, which means I can always learn from anybody in the room. There's always something. If I position myself, the Bible says, before honor comes humility, pride comes before dishonor. So if I position myself with humility, I can receive from anybody. And so I think when it comes to leadership, to hierarchy, um, for me, it starts with honor. And Jesus said, stunningly, one of the great passages that many know, Matthew 25, when I come back with all the glory of heaven. In other words, the backdrop will be obvious. You're going to see all the glory of heaven. You will know what it looks like. I'm going to ask you this. Did you see that backdrop in the least before you saw the backdrop? Did you see in the naked, the hungry, the thirsty, and the prisoner, the glory of being made in the image? Because if you did, you did it to me. So I think it's an honor. I think it starts with honor and making sure that our honor is an honor that goes in every direction through the organization, top to bottom, left to right, up, down, up, every way. And it is recognizing the glory, which I won't go into all the teaching, but we're made in the image of God. And so the glory on you, one of the aspects or expressions of glory in your life is your ability to practice as an OBGYN doctor made in the image of God. And so for me, that's where it's always going to be. If I talk about the top-down organization, the boss, the only way to get the boss's job is to split or kill the boss. And that's been the problem since the beginning of time. And that organization is a buck up organization, work harder. It's a suck up organization, suck up to the boss or you won't get promoted. It's a cover up your weakness organization. And it needs to become an empowering organization where suck up is replaced by honor, buck up is replaced by working from love, not for love, and cover up is replaced by transparency and authenticity. And that's the journey that I think we need to take organizations on.
Yes. And it's the messaging and the testimony that we can bring to healthcare as ambassadors of the kingdom. That this is the culture of heaven. This is honor. This is what it looks like. This is how it differs from what we're currently seeing. I mean, this past week I was sitting in my recovery room and just listening to the conversations. It's a big hall of all of these nurses and surgeons and patients gradually waking up in beds and bleeps and all of the monitors, and I'm listening to the nurses talking to each other, and this is going to be a conversation so many of us have heard, talking degradingly about the nurses on the med-surg unit. So, we create these degrading myths about the other, and we believe the worst about the situation. Oh, they're always ignoring our phone calls because they don't want to work. And we need to transfer this patient so we can keep people going through this recovery room. And now they're backing us up because they're so lazy over there and all these degrading things. And they're all like, yeah. And it's like this gossip thing. Well, last week this happened. Oh, yeah. And they're formulating this myth and they're reinforcing it with their storytelling. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I wonder if I should tell them what the med-surg nurses talk about them. Because I sit over there in that nursing station too, and I hear them talking about the recovery room nurses and how they're so lazy. Like they only have 1 or 2 patients assigned to them at a time, not 5 or 6. And they don't even start the PCA pump for the patient's pain control because they're so lazy. They leave it to the med-surg nurse to do post-op, and they don't even record the urine output correctly. And then the med-surg nurse has to figure it out. And all of this dishonor and assuming the worst and applying motivations that are derogatory and quite frankly, I would say from my perspective, sitting in both units, they're false. They're false. Because in both units, the nurses are working hard, and I love and respect the nurses in both units, and I think they all are dealing with differing challenges, and many of them, if not most of them, have really good intentions to bring good care to their patients. Um, but we have this culture of dishonor in our healthcare systems that's pervasive. And and I think we have an opportunity to speak a better word, to model a different way. Given the opportunity to disciple the nations, right? So by the way we behave and by the way that we speak, it's so starkly different to honor others. I remember a conversation I had with a specialist, and he was arguing with me about who should be the primary admitting doctor on a particular patient who is pregnant. And he felt very strongly because the patient was pregnant, I should be the primary admitting doctor. And I was like, well, but she has pneumonia and cardiac arrhythmias, and I'm actually that's not my specialty, and I will be involved. And he was so upset, and he kind of came across with this degrading myth process of I'm the lazy doctor who doesn't want to take responsibility for the patient. And I was like, yeah, actually, can I talk this through with you? I actually need you. Your expertise in critical care medicine, I need it. That's not my expertise. My expertise is obstetrics. And I'm really asking for your help humbly because I don't want to make the wrong decision when this patient's nurse calls me with her arrhythmia. And I am not as good at dosing and responding to a cardiac arrhythmia or reading it, interpreting it on a strip, because what I'm really good at is interpreting a fetal monitor. And I know you're not, and I know that makes you super nervous to have a second patient that you don't know how to handle, but I'm gonna be there with you, but I need you. And it was just like this silence of, "Oh," because I was actually interrupting that myth and that argument and that conflict with honor and pointing out, I'm not withholding from you. I'm not trying to pass off work, but I need you." And I think we need to be humble enough to be able to express that bravely. And I think if we would model that more as kingdom people, we would actually see we would start to shift things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess we end up with such busy working environments that maybe it's maybe it's training people to be present for long enough to actually see what other people are doing, um, value them, and we end up so busy, and then what you're describing is dehumanizing people, isn't it? In the med surge ward, and distance dehumanizes and demonizes, and all we need to do is probably get the two groups in the same room present for long enough, um, which would be the goal of unity, really, wouldn't it? Of is honor, is recognizing the incredible value. That's really, I think, what Jesus was saying when he said, "Look, if you did it to the least of me, these you did it unto me." That the way that we value other people is literally us treating them as being made in the image of God and being glory carrying in their own right, even though their glory looks very different to my glory. So it's definitely kingdom. And I think when I was reflecting on, one or two of our other conversations where, we've talked about administration, we've talked about justice, you put righteousness in there as well. And there are so many elements of solid core Christian kingdom Bible language that are healthcare, that they're like the gift of government, the gift of administration, the whole body working together, working for justice, working to bring alignment of somebody's physical body, bringing it into alignment, just in the same way as justice and righteousness is bringing us into spiritual alignment with heaven. And it really is. I think it's an incredible example of kingdom in action. Healthcare is kingdom in action. And so this battle to work together as a whole, kind of working together for the one purpose. One of my little phrases I use, which I guess applies to your overhearing these conversations, the closer we get to the front line of the battle, the less our differences matter.
Oh, how true. How true. I think I think that there are practicalities in honor too, right? Like it's not just an abstract concept. So we're talking about honor is demonstrated when we make time to see each other and to express and our consciousness and awareness of each other's value. I also think about there's systemic ways in our healthcare culture where we devalue parts. And Paul talks about, the dishonorable parts we actually are more careful to cover and to protect. And I wonder if we as believers would take that on to some degree, and things like giving time and attention to parts of the healthcare system that maybe we're running past. People within the healthcare system. I stop and talk to the housekeepers and thank them when they clean my OR. And I like to know what their name is. And I mean, that's showing honor by giving time and attention, even for a moment. It's really meaningful. What about how we give reward to different parts of the body of the healthcare system? How are we paying different parts? Is there a systematic way in which we are devaluing parts of our healthcare system? And can we advocate for each other because we see the glory in one another? I think the human tendency is to try to just mostly focus on protecting and providing for myself. But the kingdom way, we serve one another. I think it surprises some people sometimes when I seem to care that our nurses are getting adequate time off and our nurses are not being overly burdened with their assignments. Like I care about that because I value them and I see the glory in them, and I can use the glory that I carry and the authority that I carry to advocate for them. Like I should steward my voice to help the other parts that may not have the same voice in our system. And I think that that's an often overlooked opportunity for us.
Yeah, and I think it in a way it goes back um, to your message and my message on tension, because there's obvious tension in terms of if you just took pay scales, there are obvious tensions there and differences. But what you're describing is there should be a kingdom approach, and the way I typically uh, talk about the tension is I say the political tension says I'm right and you're wrong. And so we put the energy of the tension in saying I'm right and you're wrong. And the religious tension is I've got a better way to get to God than you. And yet what really the kingdom says, no, we actually take that tension and we translate it into energy, and we use that energy to pull heaven to earth, to pull tomorrow into the day, And even if you take it outside of the prophetic apostolic, what you're describing yourself as an apostolic healthcare professional who is saying, I want more of heaven on earth, and I want more of tomorrow into the day. I know we can get better. I know there's more excellence. I know there are more ways. And so you're taking the tension, because you can't solve some of the problems of different pay scales. And some of it's just life's not really very fair. The person who's a janitor may just have not had the opportunities to train to be an OBGYN. So, there's almost tension in the unfairness, and the only solution to that is the way of the kingdom, and that person being valued for what they do. And you've only got to study any of the kind of various surveys that have taken place over the years, and most people, the money that they get paid for the job they do isn't necessarily the highest motivating factor in what they do. So I think you're pulling the kingdom and saying, let's be people who stop for each other. I mean, Heidi Baker's stop for the one is just as appropriate in a hospital and stopping for the cleaner as it is stopping for the blind person in Mozambique. It's a kingdom principle.
Yeah. And I think one that we are there's a call for us to answer to. Um, and this is a shift, I think, for believers to see themselves uh, not as isolated islands of righteousness um, who demonstrate God in their individuality, but as part of the whole. And they demonstrate God by the way that they honor the glory of God in the whole, and how they're willing to serve the whole and learn from the whole, as well as teach and give. And that's a shift. And I love that shift is starting to happen, and that humility and that awareness of how God is actually asking us to position ourselves, not as experts, even as royals, but as servants, and to position ourselves to serve the whole, to to serve the potential for unity, to promote it, to advocate for the whole. Um, these are tremendous ways that we demonstrate who God is and what He's like.
Yeah. And he created us in the image of the Godhead. It says, let us make man in our image, not my image, and if that image is God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, who already exist in community and diversity and work together, we have the model in heaven of how to do what you just did, because God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit live in perfection of honor for each other, the perfection of love for each other, the perfection of loyalty to each other, which leads to absolute security in each other's identity and purpose, and not any jealousy, and they seem content to leave one on earth, you know, so to speak. So we ultimately, we have this beautiful biblical example. And I think we should all be encouraged, and you obviously know this really well, that your organizational leadership skills as a doctor in your environment, um, are it's the kingdom principles that actually work. They are the things that actually work, even if we don't put Christianese on them. They work. So valuing each other, honoring each other, stopping and thanking the cleaners for what they've done. I always got on well with the cleaners on night shift. They were always one of my favorite groups of people.
I agree. I agree. They're some of my favorite too. I think that's the mic drop that you've just laid out for us, Paul, which is the reason unity matters is because it is the ultimate expression of who God is in diversity and in unity. of the Trinity. And what an amazing thing that we're called into to joining in with that unity, that highest order diversity and unity in the essence of who God is himself. This is the call. Wow. This is the standard. Thank you, Paul. That is amazing. I think that's where we should leave it. That's where we should leave it. The great call of the unity of the Trinity. Thanks for being with me today. Thanks for being with us as well. I'm Dr. Jennifer Kang, and this is the Restore Healthcare Project. Every generation has a moment when ordinary people discover the weight of their calling. For those in healthcare, that moment has come. We feel the ache for more healing, more breakthrough, more of God's goodness restoring what's been fractured. We long to see the impossible bend under the love of Jesus. God is raising a people who will carry His Spirit into hospitals, clinics, and nations. A people who won't shrink back when the world says it can't be done. Restore Healthcare Conference 2026 is more than an event. It's a summons, a gathering of those who know they are called to push back darkness and release the atmosphere of heaven on earth. Step into the story being written right now. The light you carry is needed more than ever.